Okay, what is your name?
Teresa May Hall Anderson.
How did your parents come up with your name?
I'm not sure how they come up with my first name, but I'm named after my grandmother Scott, my mother's mother.
Your middle name is?
My middle name and her middle name were both May.
What comes to mind when you think about growing up in your hometown?
That we grew up on a farm and we had lots of animals around and just feeding animals and stuff like bum lambs and young calves and always having family come down to our house to get together. That's mainly what I remember of growing up.
Where did you grow up?
In a little community called Annis, Idaho. It was in Jefferson County. It was not actually a city, it was just a little community. So,
What did you love to do as a kid before high school?
as a kid before high school. Well, as a family, we went camping. Well, we didn't go camping. We'd take day trips, and the one thing that I loved to do would be we'd go up to Teton Valley and float the Teton River in a 6-man river raft, and that was our family outings.
Who were your best friends growing up?
Well, the very best friend that I went clear through school with was Ruth Lott. In later years, a girl named Tana Douglas moved into the area, and she was the other one that I pretty much did things with growing up.
Did you have a favorite teacher at school?
Not really a favorite, but the one I enjoyed being around was when I was in high school, and she was it used to be called home ec teacher, and that was Janet Clark. And she just was a lot of fun as a teacher.
Did you have a favorite subject?
I always liked math.
What did you love to do in high school?
Oh, in high school, me and my friends would get together and we'd go out and drive around Rexburg or drive around Idle Falls and just spend the evening that way talking to different people in other cars, and that was mainly what we did.
Did you have a favorite pet when you were a kid?
Yes, when I was growing up, we had a dog he looked like a border collie, but he had more than collie in him. And that was when the shows of Rin Tin Tin was famous, and so we named him Rinny. But he was my favorite pet.
What were you like as a child?
I would say I was bashful and shy, and so I was kind of a loner a lot of times.
Do you feel like you're still that way now?
To an extent, I have got better at being out with people and stuff than I was, but I'm still more reserved till I get to know people.
Did you ever get in trouble?
Oh yeah, I was like a typical kid. I was in trouble, but not major trouble.
What kind of trouble did you get in?
Oh, a lot of times I was told I had to be home at a certain time, and I wouldn't get home on time. Or I would be told to complete a task and I wouldn't get it done, and so then I would be in trouble for that.
What was your favorite meal growing up?
Well, it was just the basics. I mean, in our house, because I grew up on a 40-acre farm, and my folks were farmers, they ate fairly hefty meals, and so our meals usually consisted of potatoes and some kind of meat and vegetables, and
What do you remember most about your childhood or your teenage years?
I think one of the most things that I remember the most about my childhood was we had to travel about a quarter of a mile for my brothers and older sister to catch a bus to go to high school. And because I was so tiny in frame, I couldn't walk by myself. My parents wouldn't let me, and so a lot of times mother wouldn't get me ready for school until real close to when their bus would be coming. And my two brothers would grab me and they would pretty much carry me to school. I'd hit the ground about 3 times as they were running to school to catch their bus.
What's the biggest difference about today's world compared to the one you grew up in?
Today's world seems to be more in a hurry. People are more in a hurry, and growing up, it was just kind of a simple country life. We didn't have schedules that we had to be somewhere at a certain time and always on the go.
Was there a best or worst Christmas or birthday that you can remember?
Best or worst? No, not really. The best Christmas was when all the kids were at home and little, and we'd get together and have our own little Christmas at the house, and then we would go down to both grandparents' house during the day, and those were always special Christmases.
What do you remember most about your mother?
My mother was a very hard worker. She was very kind to everybody around her, and everybody loved to be at our house all the time, so we had big get-togethers at our house.
What was the most important thing to her?
I think her family.
What do you remember most about your father?
He was also a very hard-working person. Would always drop whatever he had planned to go to do for himself, and he'd go help the neighbors. So he was a very giving man, very helpful.
What was most important to him?
I think being of service to people around him and his family.
How did they influence your life?
Oh, they taught me to be the type of person that I am. One of their favorite sayings was, if you have a job to do, put 100% into it.
What parts of your parents do you see in yourself?
When I look in the mirror, I see my mother.
Do you see any of your parents in your children or grandchildren?
Oh, I think some of the personalities of my kids are kind of comparable to what my mother and dad were.
If your parents had a message that they would share with their grandchildren, what do you think it would be?
I think their message would be, remember who you are, and remember what your name is and never do anything that would detract from that.
Who were other people in your family that were important to you?
I grew up with a lot of my aunts and uncles close, and so I think they had an influence on my life. Not any one particular aunt or uncle, but I think they had an influence on my life.
So thinking about siblings, how would you describe your siblings?
They were a happy, fun-loving family. They loved to tease people. They were just seemed to always be happy and enjoy life.
Who are your siblings?
Well, my oldest brother, he was Ralph. The next brother was Leonard. The next one in line was another brother, Roy. The next one was my oldest sister, Beulah. And then there was Nick, and his name was actually Deloy, but he went by Nick as long as I can remember. And then there was my sister, Judy, and then my younger sister, Lois.
How did you meet your spouse and know that he was the one?
Well, we went to high school together, but he was an upperclassman, and so I knew who he was, but I didn't get to know him until after I was out of high school and after he was out of high school. He went through the same grades as my sister Judy, and when I first had any interaction with him was we were both working at Idaho Fresh Pack, and my sister Judy was in the hospital, and he caught up to me to find out how she was doing because she had been a classmate of his. And so that's kind of how I met him and got to talking to him was through that. And I think after dating him, I just knew he was the right one.
How would you describe your husband?
He's a kind, giving person. He's always willing to help others in any way that he can. And he loves family, so he has pretty much the same values as I was raised with. We both seem to enjoy the same things, and he's a good-looking guy, and he's my soulmate.
What's your husband's name?
Woodrow Eugene Anderson.
What do you call him?
Woody.
What do you remember about when your children were born?
Well, the first one came 3 weeks early, and when he was born, he was so tiny. He was only 5 pounds 11 ounces, so he was really tiny. When Jeff was born, he was also born 3 weeks early, and while he was in the hospital, he turned a little bit yellow, and so we had to put him under, lay him in the sunshine on the table for first couple of weeks of his life. Daniel, he was I think the most easygoing child I had when he was born. He didn't have any problems. He was just a good-natured little guy. Then I waited for over 4 years to have the next child, Nick, and he was also a pretty happy guy. But he grew up worrying about his brothers. I don't know why he thought it was his job to worry about his brothers, but he did. And then we had Tim, and Tim, I think, follows more of my family's genetic line because he loves to tease people and he loves to make them laugh, and so. But they were a delight when they were younger, but a handful.
Were you ever scared to be a parent?
Oh yes, I was afraid I would not do what I needed to do to make them grow up to be good people. And I was always afraid I'd do something that might hurt them. So, yes, I was scared.
What 3 words would you say represented your approach to parenting?
Oh, I wanted them to learn to be truthful.
What did you love the most about being a parent?
Listening to my kids and my husband when they got to playing, and listen to them laugh and giggle and enjoy themselves.
How did you choose your career, and what was your favorite part about it?
I really didn't choose a career. Coming from a small community, when I graduated from high school, because my parents were not very financially fluent, I didn't feel like I could afford to go to college, because at that time I didn't know about the type of college stuff, the loans and stuff that you could get to go to college. So I never planned on going to college. So I went to work at Idle Fresh Pack, and because my job was a seasonal job, they usually shut down for 3 months during the summer. One summer I went to work in Idle Falls as a receptionist for a typewriter and office machines repair business, and I worked there through the summer, and then I went back to Idle Fresh Pack that fall, and that's when my husband and I started dating. And then I had promised a lady that I would work up in West Yellowstone as a waitress for her for the summer. And so that was the summer that he proposed, and I told him we couldn't get married until after the summer was over, because I'd promised this lady I would work for her through the summer. And so that's why we set one of the reasons we set our wedding date in November.
Do you have any hobbies?
I love to sew. I love to do handwork like crocheting or embroidering. Those are and reading. So.
Oh, one thing I forgot to ask. How would you describe your husband?
Oh, like I said, he's smart. He's giving. He's fun to be around. He's good looking. He's just an all-around wonderful guy.
Is there from any of your hobbies, is there anything that you've created that you are proud of?
Well, I think mainly my quilts. I'm trying to make quilts for all of my grandchildren for a wedding gift, and I think I'm kind of proud of the way they're turning out.
What are some of the happiest moments in your life?
Oh, I think one of the happiest moments was the day I got married. The next happiest moments would be probably when each one of my children were born, and seeing my children married and happy are my happy days.
What what's the hardest obstacle you have overcome?
Being shy and not wanting to put myself out there and meet new people.
What what advice would you give to your children and grandchildren?
Be hard workers and always go the extra mile for people around you. And be kind to others.
Are there any adventures or stories or anything that you would like to share?
Well, one adventure that I remember, and it's one that is talked about in my family quite often, is we went up to Teton Valley to float the river, and as I said before, we floated it in a rubber raft. And my dad liked to stand up in the boat, and we were coming down the river, and the boat was floating over toward the bank, and I and my siblings and my mother was telling him that we were going to hit the bank, and he was concentrating on this fish he was trying to catch, and we hit the bank, and he went headfirst over into the river, and my sister, Judy, grabbed his foot. She thought she was pulling him back in the boat, but instead she was holding him so he couldn't get his head above the water. And he finally got his head up and said, "Let go, you're drowning me." And I think that's one of the funnest things that we did, was being together with the family. But I remember him falling in the creek.